Archie. How are you?
They're told rabbis allowed to say compliments. My friend Saul has not stopped raving about it. He said to his California, he said to his entire mailing list, things that he sends out. I've known him since I'm 15. I worked for Mark.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Saturdays,
Wait, and what was it called? Something dead. That's right.
So daughter stayed with me.
Oh, she did?
Yes, she's right. No, maybe since she was a baby. So
Good morning, everybody. Boker Tov. Shabbat Shalom. I have a couple of bits and bobs of housekeeping as we begin. First of all, thanks to those of you who've already put on name tags. Here's the thing, you might know everybody around you, but they might not know your name, even if you've been studying together for so long. So thank you for putting a name tag on. We are very excited because this morning is our first Shabbat morning service that's not connected to B'nai Mitzvah. So at 10:30, we have the option to go to the chapel. I hope you'll join me there. There is a Kiddush luncheon afterwards. So if you like a double head or bagel day, it's a really great day for you. Speaking of bagels, I want to thank our bagel sponsor, Flo Friedman, in memory of her husband, Barry, and thank you, Flo. And our bagel picker-upper, which is a very technical term, Mike Schwartz. Thank you for schlepping the bagels. We love a bagel here at Mishkan Or. We go through so many, so very, very many. Okay, did I have other announcements to tell you before I start? We'll find out later if I forgot something. All right, friends. Everyone should have a handout in front of them. We are beginning a new book of the Torah, the middle book, Leviticus. If you feel so moved, will you join me in our blessing for the study of Torah? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. All right, we have a very lively Torah portion outline this morning. If you like blood and guts, this is a great one for you. We will have first procedures for 3 types of basic offerings: the Olah, the Mincha, and the Shlamim. Then we will learn about the purgation offering, the Chatat, and lots of different ways a person could incur guilt or work through that guilt, and then the Asham offering. So, it's always interesting when we get to Leviticus, I think, and I taught this portion with all of you last year, and I went on an emotional journey throughout the course of that session because I started the session last year being strongly anti-Leviticus and then convinced myself somehow through teaching all of you that I actually liked it a little. So we'll see what kind of a journey we can go on this year with Leviticus. But some more framing here at the bottom of page 1, the second half, just to frame the book as we prepare to dive in. Leviticus aims to shape the Israelites into a holy people and to safeguard the purity that it considers essential for contact with the holy. The Hebrew name Vayikra, God called, refers to God summoning Moses and giving him the instructions that constitute most of the book. The English name Leviticus refers to Levi, a son of Leah and Jacob and the ancestor of our priests. Leviticus reflects the perception that God's created world is fundamentally harmonious, good, and orderly, as in Genesis 1. To preserve God's orderly world where everything has an assigned place, Leviticus specifies what must be done whenever boundaries are wrongfully crossed, be they boundaries of the body, time, or space, such as between sacred and non-sacred, or between life and death. In this book's worldview, anyone who breaks God's ordained harmony can and must repair it. Rituals, including sacrifices, serve to cancel or neutralize damage done to the created order, and thereby restore the equilibrium. Let me just pause there for a second. Doesn't that sound lovely? To be able to restore the intended harmony of creation? If only we were able to do that. I'm not sure the priests were able to either, but it's a nice ambition. In Leviticus, a person's body, the sanctuary, and the community each constitute a microcosm of the universe in its sacred aspect. Each reflects and has an impact upon the larger integrated whole. Consequently, holiness and purity are relevant to all aspects of Israelite life. They apply not merely to the sanctuary, but also to the body and the home. Therefore, the book legislates laws about food, sexual relations, and ethics, in addition to providing extensive instructions about sacrificial offerings. Although priests have a unique role, all Israelites must be holy, for God is holy. So it's a kind of interesting tension for us to wrestle with because our culture as Reformed Jews or even as just modern Americans is not hyper-focused on purity. So before we dive into the text itself, I'd just love to hear a reflection or two on how you feel like we relate to purity today as a concept. I'll start. So, and then you might go. Because something just popped into my head. I grew up in a very conservative suburb of Cincinnati in Warren County, and it was very common for girls to receive purity rings. And they would have little ceremonies with their dads. Have you heard of these? Some of you have. So it's complicated because as a person who deals in ritual, I don't ever want to disparage the ritual life of any other group of people. But I remember even as a child feeling agitated, let's say, made uncomfortable by this practice where there were white dresses and ceremony and a daughter and her father and the exchange of a purity ring to promise, as she, usually around purity, would not be engaging in premarital sex. So purity for me, when I hear the word, I think of purity rings. I have a kind of visceral reaction to that phrase. And so that's like the kind of childhood baggage I take into the arena of purity, which of course, I have moved through as an adult. Now I think a lot about Leviticus too. But that's a piece of the history I'm carrying with me. Michael, what did you want to say about purity?
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, that I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this.
Uh-oh.
So when I hear that word, I think nowadays, being the age I am, and with the experiences that I've had, I think it's an unreasonable expectation.
Okay.
And that the reality of living in the world, at least for me, is that I open myself up by participating in the world. I'm constantly opening myself up to hypocrisy. And I just have to accept that I cannot hold on to some standard of purity and be able to operate in the world.
Okay.
So that's.
Thank you. No, I don't think you're going to get in trouble for that. That seems non-troublemaking. Steve, what do you think? And then Arthur. I got excited about the trouble.
In our age, we could have an equivalent. We could think about an equivalent.
Okay.
I'm looking at the electrical outlets.
Mm-hmm.
There's an electrical standard, and you could go in and you could wire it up any which way, but you could more likely than not have either a non-functional outlet or something that could cause real harm.
Right.
So we have rules, and we have the priests of electricity, called electricians, who make
I
sure
love that.
that the electrical outlets are safe, functional, and they work amazingly with anything we plug into it.
That's the right shape and size.
Yes,
So,
they're standards.
Steve, I am really drawn to this analogy with electricity, and I'm thinking particularly of the priests who get zapped. It's a really powerful analogy. And also, I think there's something electrifying about being in relationship with God. Like, really, I think there really is for the people. Like, this is the kind of sustaining force. And so to tap into some of that power kind of channeled correctly is their mission. This is really great. Yeah, Arthur. And then I'm coming your way.
So I'm glad you raised this question, because over the years I think of the sense of purity in the text as very peculiar and foreign, actually. So
Okay.
the word pure means things to the modern ear. I'm not sure the Hebrew touches that. So when I read about what's pure and impure, I don't read in the text anything about a moral purpose. Like you're impure, that you're wrong.
Right.
You're impure. It's different than being evil or wrong. And I also don't think it's utilitarian. I don't think it's to make things work. The closest parallel I can think of that we have today to pure and impure is kosher and not kosher.
Okay.
Which doesn't, I guess there's moral hazard in purity, but it's not actually an evil deed. It's not evil. It's just, it's on a different dimension than good and bad. So I'm curious about it because, and I don't think it has much to do with sexual morality either. These are, when you read the purity laws, they seem very arbitrary. Like so I'm not sure what's being constructed here. I don't think we really have a deep analogy today. So to me,
I think peculiar is a really good word for it. And I think to your point, at least in this era, it's more about like qualified or unqualified, right? Like if someone is pure, it means they're qualified to enter whatever space is sacred or to offer whatever offering. It's not about their inner being. What's interesting, I think, is as we move from sacrifices to prayer, that kind of seems to move over. Maybe it didn't happen at the same time culturally, but I could see it kind of transitioning around the same time as purity becomes not just kind of ritual action and who's able to offer, who's qualified to offer, but actually we kind of like transpose it onto the person. Are they morally pure? Yeah, please.
What bothers me is that there's nothing for commitment for young men. You just
Oh, yeah, well, welcome to the patriarchy.
And I also think that adultery plays into it.
That what plays into it?
Adultery.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that later in our text. Not, maybe not this week, but yes, absolutely. Please.
Well, also in our modern culture, we're very accepting of gay people, which famously Leviticus 18:22 isn't. And I know as levied by Christians, sometimes the idea of purity to like moralize and judge people who are different. And I'm not sure if that's what they were intending originally, but it's certainly there in the text.
Yep, it is. When we get to the middle of Leviticus, we have a lot to wrestle with. And different denominations have handled that differently, to some of their success and to some of their shame. Yeah. Candy and then Judy.
I always associated the purity, the idea of purity with the priests
Mm-hmm.
and the holy things that they do. And I never thought that the common people would necessarily have to relate to that in the same way, or
Right.
strictly.
It feels like, especially in the biblical text itself, that's resonant. I think when we get to the rabbinic era and they're trying to figure out how to keep following God's law without the temple, there's a different focus on purity, family purity, and all sorts of different like blood-related rituals. But I think in the biblical era, it seems to be mostly focused on the priests. Yeah, Judy.
For contemporary time, think of purity as, I'm a label reader.
Okay.
So I want to see like what are the ingredients in something.
Okay.
And how many things are like, clean and kosher.
Uh-huh.
Versus like there are chemicals I can't pronounce and they don't belong there. So,
This is another, I think this analogy really lands with me also, because think about all of the times, you buy something and then you see the recall notice that it was contaminated with something, or like there's metal in your deodorant, or there's E. coli in your bagged salad, whatever it is. It's always bad news. Whatever the recall is, it's bad news. But it feels bad because first of all, it's dangerous, but also because it's violating. Something got in the package that wasn't labeled. Something that wasn't supposed to be there was there. That's the boundary is the key for Leviticus. They want in and out, black and white, up or down, pure, impure. They want to know where the lines are. And so I think like those violations feel extra bad. All right, one more, Lou, and then we'll dive into the text.
There's contradiction as far as purity goes. I think of, in the Torah doesn't say, your misdeeds or go four generations.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, we have Yom Kippur, and I remember listening to a sermon about this virulent anti-Semite who reforms and sees his better ways and, changes his, tune. And, how do you reconcile that with the saying that it goes four generations? Because it's, why bother in a sense?
Mm.
So, or currently it's like, any, like a politician or some, celebrity did something, obnoxious when they were like a teenager, and now they're 40 years old and that's the headline now,
Right.
So,
I guess part of it's just how much do we actually believe in the teshuvah process? How much is available to us? And actually, one of our offerings is an offering of expiation. We'll see kind of this tension of kind of what counts towards it and who's guilty enough to offer it and all of that. Okay, join me on page 2 if you please. Thank you for those reflections. It's an interesting way to think about what we're carrying into the word purity. Our Torah portion begins with this verse, Vayikra el Moshe, Vayidaber Adonai elav, me'ohel moed lemor. So you'll see in the translation you have on the sheet, which is the JPS gender neutral translation, it says Adonai called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting saying, which is my favorite way to end a verse. It doesn't actually say that God called to Moses, though. Anybody using a different translation that has a way of handling that ambiguity for verse 1? What do you have there, Friedman? Is that Friedman? What have you got? What?
Fox renders.
Oh, yeah.
And he called to Moses.
He with a capital H?
No.
Interesting. He with no capital H. Cool. Okay, Vivian, what have you got? Friedman. Capital H. Okay, anybody have an alternative translation? You guys know I love this. I love the comparative translations. Okay, so we have an ambiguity, and even actually on the first page in the framing, it had, if you look in the second line, if you want to, God is in brackets. It says, and in brackets, God called. So we have this strange thing happening here where we seem to be starting in the middle of an idea. So how did we end the book of Exodus? Does anyone remember where we were just a week ago?
God descended on the tabernacle.
Indeed, we built the house and God came. If you build it, God will come. That's what we learned, right? So we have ended in the Mishkan, and we seem to just pick up. And so I bring to you from one of my favorite scholars, Aviva Zornberg. She wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Hidden Order of Intimacy, which is her reflections on the book of Leviticus. And her main thesis is that all of Leviticus is a response to the golden calf incident. It is the book of Teshuvah that repairs the relationship between the Israelites and God after their heinous idolatry. So that's her framework through the whole thing. It's very, very interesting. If anyone wants to do a read-along as we start the book of Leviticus, it's a very rich, deep, dense book to chew through. But I think that what she gives us here is interesting. She's going to take us through a couple of rabbinic sources, so let's look at this together on page 2. The opening word of Leviticus, Vayikra, and he called to Moses. Who is the one who calls? Presumably it is God who calls Moses' name, but he is unnamed. Strangely, the new book begins with an unnamed subject of revelation. This should be God's name. This is my typo. Sorry, that's an autocorrect issue. God's name follows only in the next clause, and God spoke to him. Only after the anonymous call does God speak to Moses, revealing the laws of sacrifice and other laws relating to the newly constructed tabernacle. There is, of course, no real mystery about who is calling. Nevertheless, why, at the very beginning of the book, is his identity somewhat awkwardly obscured? He called and God spoke. By the way, normally when I give you a source, I change all the he's to God. I did not do it here for the reason of the ambiguity around the lowercase or capital H. So bear with me. The classic medieval commentator Ramban, Nachmanides, sets this anomalous opening in the context of the conclusion of the previous book, Exodus. Moses was unable to enter the tent of assembly, for the cloud rested upon it and God's glory filled the tabernacle. Exodus ends with Moses excluded from the sacred space he has so faithfully constructed. The cloud and the fire that represent God's presence in the tabernacle make it impossible for him to enter that space, until, that is, God called his name, inviting him, as it were, to enter into the cloud. Only with this call is a human path opened up for him into the mysterium tremendum. In Ramban's narrative, the two books are joined across a formal gap. God's glory is the subject of the closing sentence of Exodus. God remains the subject of the opening of Leviticus. Moses' situation outside the tabernacle, excluded by God's presence, is resolved by his call of invitation. In this situation, the divine call overcomes Moses' exclusion. At the same time, however, a new consciousness of inside and outside comes into existence. One book ends with alienation, while the new book begins with closure. Okay, so that's option 1. I think inside, outside, included, excluded, these make a lot of sense as we get into Leviticus. Rashi, however, reads the opening word Vayikra in order to raise a different question. What is the function of the act of calling? Every time God spoke or said or commanded, he by calling in a tone of affection, chiba, from the word chaviv, and encouragement, in the tone that the ministering angels use. As it is said, they call to one another, saying, Holy, holy, holy is the God of hosts. Before every divine revelation, not only in this particular situation, there is a calling. Rashi is interested in the phenomenon of revelation that is glimpsed in the call-speech nexus. The question of the subject of the call is not overtly addressed. In Rashi's proof text from Isaiah, the angels call to one another even before they begin praising God. Rashi shifts the scene from the call of God to a human being to a mutual calling between equals. To illustrate God's particular relation to Moses, Rashi focuses on the tonal resonance of the word kara, calling. It is the essential preliminary, like the sounding of the tuning fork, to their harmony, an intimate calling to attention. For Rashi, this tone always characterizes God's calls to Moses. In a sense, it bridges the gap that exists even between equals. Okay, are you with me so far? This is very interesting, isn't it? I find this very interesting. You don't have to. I do. I find it very interesting. Just the specialness of the relationship between God and Moses, that we could have that reflected somehow here, feels very powerful. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I can, just to follow up on this very intimate, close calling relationship, if you look at the Hebrew text of Vayikra, the size of the aleph is diminished.
That's right.
And to me, it reflected a more intimate, almost what we talked about before, tzimtzum, God allowing more space for Moses to bring himself in and his voice.
So the tiny aleph is such a rich field for our sages to wrestle with. So some think that it's that God kind of enacts tzimtzum and makes space for Moses, and some think that it symbolizes how humble Moses is and unwilling to take up space. And even that is a tension that's worth exploring, right? Like who's making space for whom? And it's kind of like they're dancing in this space that in theory is filled with some piece of the presence of God, which is of course too grand to be fitted into a mishkan. But yeah, it's a great connection to the tiny aleph. Let's keep going just a tiny bit. The Talmud teaches a norm of polite behavior, to address the other by name before beginning to speak. To start speaking abruptly without calling by name is a kind of aggression, an entry into private space. Similarly, God hates one who enters his friend's house suddenly, meaning without warning. The door knocker protects privacy. This can be learned from God's behavior when he enters the Garden of Eden in order to rebuke Adam. And God called out to Adam and said, Ayeka, where are you? God observes the same decorum in addressing Moses, even though Moses is described as faithful, meaning a familiar presence in all my household. He calls his name before speaking to him, that is, before entering his domain. So God is knocking on the door before going into Moses' domain. This is actually good manners on behalf of God. It's a, hey, buddy, I'm coming in. Coming in. Interesting. Okay, a little bit more. Calling before speaking, then, is a matter of propriety shared by God, angels, and human beings. It is a matter of respecting boundaries. When God calls out, however, this can signify two different situations. When he gives permission to Moses to enter the sacred interior, and when he asks permission to address him. In both cases, there is a real gap between self and other that requires bridging, a sense of delicacy and difference. Breaking through the gap could be considered threatening or rude, an act of aggression. But in the one case, it is Moses who is in awe of the boundary and awaits God's invitation. In the other case, it is God who, in calling Moses' name, models sensitivity around thresholds. In the first situation, it is God who is inside, Moses who is outside. In the second, God is outside, addressing Moses. Moses is the object of God's desire. Who then is the subject of desire in our text? The one who calls is presumably God, but perhaps the fact that God's name is not used at the moment of calling evokes the tension of such moments, moments of revelation, of incipient intimacy. Whose is the desire? Perhaps Moses, the object of the divine call, is also in some sense its subject. So just from one word, the very first word of the book, we have all of this kind of relational tension and interplay. And I think it's such an interesting way to characterize the book, because basically what we're going to do for the next many chapters is wrestle with inside and outside, included and excluded, holy and profane, or just non-holy, sacred and not sacred, pure and impure. And so the idea that God and Moses in the first word are kind of mirroring back some of that tension, which of course I don't think is what the biblical writers intended, but is a fun, circumstance to be on this side of history, having received all the rabbinic text. I just think it's so compelling. The idea that we have to call to someone before we speak to them, that we actually address someone by name and say, hey, hello, I am talking to you now. Like that's an interesting way to think about God conceiving of a relationship with a prophet, with any human being. In theory, God is the boss. God could just roll in and start giving rules. But actually, God's going to call first. Knock on that door, yeah.
So, I'm a little confused because I think the same root means to read or read out loud. So, but it also, I just looked up, it derives from to call, like we've been talking about, but it also derives from to read. And reading seems very different than calling. So reading is a pre-formed text. It's not an innovative thing. You're saying something that's been said before, written down. That's very different, I think, than calling. So I'm intrigued by how they interrelate.
I have an instinct here. I don't know that it's the answer, but it's an instinct. So if you think about kind of early literacy in a pre-printing press existence, there was not much available to read. One person had to read aloud so that folks could hear what was being written. So my guess is the connection between the two is that someone was calling out written text. So it is different than like, I'm calling you. That's also how you say like, my name is. You say like, I am called, blah, blah, blah in Hebrew. So I think that's another thing where it's like, there's all these kind of ripples from the same root, but my guess is early literacy led to things being called aloud. So it wasn't like reading, like I'm reading silently in my head.
Like a herald reading a parchment.
Exactly, yep.
It's a proclamation.
And you think about public Torah reading days, they were read out loud. Yeah. Maybe that's the answer, maybe it's not, but that's my instinct. Yeah. Please.
I also think connected to the point before mass printing, there wasn't this concept of like nonfiction or a neutral presentation of history. Like anytime someone wrote something, it was subjective and personal, which I think is more connected to the idea of calling, like it's a personal connection with the intention.
Interesting. I like that. I wonder if they thought that though. Did they think it was personal and subjective? That's a good. Some of Torah, especially some of our later writings, feel like they think they're just historical documents that are neutral, when of course they're not. I mean, even Leviticus, you think about we think about religion as political, not partisan, but political. You think about what it means that, in a scroll, the most important text is the middle of the scroll, kind of where it naturally falls when you just let the sides roll in. That's the book of Leviticus. So the priests put their own book in the middle. They show you that it's the most important thing. We have a strong priestly bias in Torah, but that doesn't mean that all the texts that the community were using were priestly texts. That's just what gets canonized. So if we use, our historical imagination, we could consider that there were lots of other texts that just didn't make it in. And so I always wonder what those might have been. That's why the Dead Sea Scrolls were such an exciting moment, because there were things there that kind of helped us understand a wider breadth of what was being written and used as sacred texts at their time. Should we get into the actual Torah portion? Do we feel ready? That was a good warm-up. All right, verse 2. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any of you presents an offering of cattle to God, you shall choose your offering from the herd or from the flock. If your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you shall make your offering a male without blemish. You shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in your behalf before God. You shall lay a hand upon the head of the burnt offering, that it may be acceptable in your behalf in expiation for you. The bull shall be slaughtered before God, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer the blood, dashing the blood against all sides of the altar that is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The burnt offering shall be flayed and cut up into sections. Yum. The sons of Aaron the priest shall put fire on the altar and lay out wood upon the fire. And Aaron's sons, the priest, shall lay out the sections with the head and the suet on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. Isn't this exciting? I always feel bad for the kids that get by as their Torah portion, yeah.
It's just, the first thing that strikes me is it's so aggressive.
Oh, it's awful. Really violent. What's interesting is there are these moments of real closeness too. You have to physically put your hands on the head of the animal you're about to offer. That's an intimate moment. I mean, you think about like when a dog walks up to you and you kind of like, it's right here and you touch its head. Like it's an intimate moment. You are making eye contact in theory with this animal. And then it's just blood and guts. It's so gory. And later there's dashing of blood on the corners of the altar. I mean, it's very visceral. What's interesting is we know the lifeblood belongs to God. Blood is a very powerful thing in our tradition, in our text, I think that's not unique to the Jews, by the way. Blood, we know, is a familiar piece of many rituals around the world. So it is very gory. It seems very violent. What I am always interested by is how specific it is about it being Aaron and the sons. So for something that in theory is going to be done generation after generation, and that is made clear later, but here it seems to be about these specific people doing this thing. Not the high priest and the priests that are beneath him, but actually Aaron and his sons. It's like a family business still, which makes sense. It's early days. We're just getting started. Okay, here's something from, yes, please, Beta.
Wasn't Aaron considered a priest?
Yes, he's the high priest. He's like the priest with a capital P. Yeah, Beth.
So I've been reading these verses very carefully, as you might imagine.
Yes.
And it occurs to me that it says when you, or I'm not sure, but when someone brings an offering, and then it says he, and then, laughing, but
Yeah.
you know,
The pronouns, yeah.
the person who's making the offering does all these things. The person slaughters the animal and cuts it up.
Yep.
And then the priests do their thing on the altar. But
Yep.
everything that happens and washing, there's washing, there's all kinds of stuff, that's all done by the offerer, not by the priest.
Yep. It's all supervised. But it's,
Supervised, but it's very specific. When the priest does something, it says,
yes, it
the
does.
son of Aaron the priest is going to do this and this and this. And then you do that.
So when you think about what this will mean as the ritual life kind of transforms over time, and as we get into the use of the temple, the capital T temple, capital letters are a big part of today's session. I feel like we're on Sesame Street. So I think there's a whole economy that comes with it. In these early days, it feels, it's like whatever the opposite of sterilized is. Like it is as connected. This is the opposite of when you go to a cemetery for a burial and there's a fake turf around the grave. This is the opposite of that. You are part of the action. It's really very hands-on, very tactile.
We might be squeamish about this, but the person bringing the offering, he's doing this all the time. It's just not an offering. He's feeding his family. So he has a herd. The herd isn't there for, pleasure.
Right.
It's for feeding his family. So, my family business was beef slaughtering. So I'm not squirming at all on this. This is very familiar. I saw this as a young child.
Yeah. Well, that changes how we interact with it.
I have a question. This is an instruction manual.
It is an instruction manual.
But it doesn't explain why do I have to do it in the first place.
Ah, very good. So each sacrifice in how many are there? 6 different kinds or 5 different kinds in this week's Torah portion? Olam, mincha, shlamim, chatat, asham. There's 5 in this week. So these are the main 5. Each one does have its own reasons. The first one we just seem to jump in. There doesn't seem to be a real reason, although it does make expiation, it says. That's also, we're going to see that over and over. This Torah portion references atonement many different ways. but you're right, we're just offering them. The hint, I guess, is in the name. So if it's a korban, we're drawing close. But yeah, you're right. For an instruction book, it's starting off a little bit vague. Let's see those, we keep going. My teacher, Rabbi Mary Zamor, wrote a piece for the Social Justice Torah commentary on this week's Torah portion, and I brought it because I think they are interesting. You'll tell me. The Israelite sacrificial cult is designed to function in an atmosphere of radical transparency. After the engaging narratives of Genesis and Exodus, it is easy to overlook the revolutionary nature of Leviticus. The laws regulating sacrifices were given to the entire people of Israel, not just to the elite class of priests. There were no esoteric secret rituals known only to the Kohanim, the priestly class. Furthermore, the sacrifices were performed publicly. As the Torah, a women's commentary, explains, although Leviticus preserves the priest's privileged monopoly regarding the service at the altar and its sacrifices, these instructions demystify the priest's role by making knowledge about their activities known to every Israelite. Coupled with the prohibition against land ownership by the priests in Numbers, universal access to the law equalized power in the Israelite community. Kohanim were supposed to facilitate the community's efforts to draw near to God rather than amass power for themselves. The public viewing of offerings also created accountability. The Hebrew term edah, community, is related to aid, witness. If a priest inadvertently made a mistake or knowingly deviated from the prescribed rites, the Israelites would know because they could witness the offerings in real time. The elevated status of the Kohanim in the community required that they be held to a high standard. Parashat Vayikra demands a rigorous method of atonement for the priest's misdeeds, whether they were known to the public or not. It should be noted that the Torah also holds chieftains to a higher standard than that of ordinary Israelites, but not as high as the priests. This portion clearly teaches that the greater one's status is in the community, the more accountable one must be for one's actions. Yes, Jackie.
Is there a reason, or could this be the reason, that a kosher butcher or kosher facility has to slaughter their animal in front of a rabbi?
The mashgiach?
Yes. And make sure that everything is being followed according to the laws?
So it is related. I think the mashgiach serves even a different purpose, which is actually to, I don't know that the dynamic is that it has to be public, it's that it has to be correct. So the mashgiach is really the checker to make sure that the slaughter is happening correctly. I think here, that's part of it, but it also is meant to be public. So a kosher butcher can do things behind closed doors as long as they've got their mashgiach with them. Here, it has to be very much publicly accessible. Now, there's a few reasons for this. It's not just for transparency. It's also because the people are making the offerings. The priests are the facilitators. If the people aren't involved, the offerings aren't happening. It's not being facilitated. But this idea about accountability within the ancient Israelite community, I think, is a very interesting one, and that's the one that's kind of top of mind when we think of Leviticus and the priests. We're not always thinking like, oh, how are the priests being held accountable? But the idea that the laws are given to everybody and that the whole community has a piece of responsibility and obligation to making sure that the priests are doing their jobs is an interesting power structure. Yeah.
I can't read it.
Well, but it's called out loud. We're reading it out loud.
Maybe.
But they're hearing it. They're hearing Moses is telling them, right? Moses is supposed to be telling them the rules. They had very good memories. The ancient Israelites had very good memories. Yeah.
But the premise of sacrifice itself is kind of bizarre because you're destroying something God created to somehow appease God. And it always confused me because somebody came up with this idea of sacrifice, and that's out of fear, to gain God's favor. Because why in the world would God want you to destroy something he created?
Well, and why did people around the world have the same kind of instinct?
Well, the answer is because you have to eat. And this is a rationalization for killing a live thing.
Maybe.
So my point is the idea of sacrifice is an incredibly man-made idea to appease abstract thing we're afraid of. So it's a big circle to me.
Yeah, that's a really interesting framing. I think the idea that there were a few threads there. One is we have to eat anyway. Is there a way we could kill an animal that makes it feel okay to us? That's real. And by the way, there are folks in modern Jewish life who are turning away from traditional kashrut and preferring a kind of like ethical kashrut of how is the animal I'm about to eat tended to? What's its short life like? How is it killed? Is it important that there's a mashgiach, or is it important that it's free range and fed without antibiotics? Like there are people who are looking at kind of the moral, which I know we've kind of briefly alluded to, like is kashrut a moral, immoral boundary, but kind of thinking about like what's ethical about kashrut. And when you think about the kashrut industry, it is a very large, very financially successful industry. It's very, if you're about to buy a kosher brisket for Passover, it is a booming industry with very high ticket prices. So if there is a high value placed on just the halacha of kashrut or on the kind of care of creatures side of kashrut. And of course, there are folks that really value both. And they tend to go to like small scale local butchers instead of the big like empire butchers. But so that's thread one. And then thread two is basically like, if we have created sacrifices to appease a god that we're afraid of, I'm always interested in how around the world people offered sacrifices in ancient times. This was a very common thing. Some people were sacrificing their children. And you think about like what those societies would have been like. Ours is clearly against that. But I think it's an interesting framing, like why are we doing it at all? Yeah.
So the other way that you can see the power of sacrifice, inspired by your comment, Jim, is that you're tapping into something powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We're always, I think that's very alive today. People do things and respond to things that have great power.
Mm-hmm.
And John Levinson writes about the connection, how animal sacrifices replaced human sacrifices. There's a continuity there.
Mm-hmm.
References to the power of human sacrifice in our text around Passover with the death of the firstborn and the Akedah. And even today, loss of life, human life is considered one of the most powerful events, and it shapes history.
Mm-hmm.
Romeo and Juliet's a story about how loss of life stopped the loss of human life that stopped the feud, at least for a day or two.
Well, we have a whole section on Yom Kippur of martyrology.
Martyrology is, so there it is.
It's built right into the Machzor.
And a central piece of Yom Kippur story is also the sacrificial rites, the priests entering the Holy of Holies.
And the goat demon.
The
Don't forget, Arthur, don't forget Azazel.
So there's this thing about plugging, we have this habit.
Yeah, we tap in.
Seeking some sense of higher sense of power or meaning through this loss of life theme.
For sure.
And what's frightening to me is there's people in Israel now ready to go with this, wanting to tap into this power again.
Oh yeah. And doing it explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not all of, oh yeah.
I was just going to say, I think there's also kind of a naturalism to sacrifice, because most of the time, there's this human narrative that we're like different and above animals, more rational and ordered, but this is very violent and almost animalistic, like when a lion kills a gazelle, it literally tears it apart into pieces. It's almost a contradiction to what we usually think about ourselves.
Interesting. Well, and then we have to kind of wrestle with that tension. Yeah.
So, three things. One is, remember, we were supposed to be, we were all vegetarian.
We were all vegetarian.
I don't know.
Yep.
For whatever reason, God allowed us to eat meat after that. Number two, sacrifice was looked at in ancient times often as feeding the gods. And in Psalms 50, that specifically says, I don't need that.
Right.
And then the last thing is that famous passage, let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a brimming stream, is preceded, I mean, the reason for that, it says, though you will offer me burnt offerings and meal offerings, I will not accept them. Because he wants justice, not sacrifice.
Well, and then we have to wonder, like, when we think about when the Psalms were written, Like, are they exilic? Is it that God doesn't want them because God can't have them anymore? Is it a way of making the people who are in exile feel like they can still access God even without the sacrifices? But I think you're right to point out those texts because they really show us the dynamic between the two. Like, is God actually eating? Is this a sacrifice for God to eat? Or is it a sacrifice for the priests to eat? And some of it, the priests don't get to eat either, but I think this whole idea of feeding is a really interesting thread through all of these sacrifices. Yeah, Flo?
I remember a Torah study, maybe 2 years ago, the subject of what you mentioned, that we were vegetarians. And God saw how terrible people were to each other. And God said, rather than killing each other, so you can kill animals.
Right. Like, is the move away from vegetarianism because it's God appeasing the bloodlust of humanity, basically? Which maybe not. We don't know. It's one of these great enduring mysteries. Steve, and then we'll jump back in to a less bloody sacrifice.
There's an element, how far I want to push that, is God can create creatures, but humans, these are domesticated animals, there's the grain offering and so on.
Right.
It's God and people together creating or raising up the animal or raising the wheat for the sacrifice.
Right.
So what the sacrifice could represent is, I love God so much, I'm going to give something. God had a contribution, but I had also a contribution to creating this thing. And essentially giving God my time, part of my life, by giving up the sacrifice. I'm essentially offering my time that took to raise that animal as part of it. And since God can create the animal again, it's no big loss that we've been able to kill it, and God could create that animal again. If God is all powerful.
It's interesting too, because you're really speaking about the larger investment of these sacrifices, of the time and the years put into, especially the animal ones.
Right.
Yeah.
And humans have a limited lifespan. So
Right.
giving up some of our time is important. It's like, I love God so much, I'm going to give up something that I can never get back.
Interesting. Let's talk about something that's not blood and guts. Look here at chapter 2, verse 1. The nefesh ki takriv korban mincha ladonai. When a person presents an offering, we're going to do another translation thing here in a second. When a person presents an offering of grain to God, the offering shall be of choice flour. The offerer shall pour oil upon it and lay frankincense on it. So we have the nefesh ki takriv. Here, JPS gives us when a person. Friedman, what do you have? Vivian, what do you guys have over there? And a person. Steve, what's Fox got? What does Fox say on this? 2-1.
A person.
A person. Anybody have anything but person for nefesh? What does nefesh mean?
Soul.
Soul. How can a soul give a sacrifice? How can a soul give a sacrifice that is tangible? Perhaps is what we should say. And what is this sacrifice? We have an offering of grain, a mincha. You might hear mincha service. A mincha, this is that service. Okay, so our sages want to know, what in the world could this mean? Here we have, this teaching comes from Ein Yaakov. Rabbi Isaac said, why has the sacrifice of the mincha been singled out in the passage with the term nefesh? The Holy One, praised be he, said, who usually brings a mincha? Surely the poor man. I shall therefore consider his sacrifice as if he sacrificed his own soul before me. Rabbi Isaac said further, why is the mincha different from all other sacrifices? That in connection with a mincha, there are 5 kinds of preparations. This may be compared unto a frail king for whom a friend prepared a feast. The king, knowing that his friend was poor, said to him, make it in 5 kinds of preparation, so that I may enjoy your treatment. So here is an interesting economical sensitivity that we see actually over and over in Leviticus. So we talk often about how expensive a cow is. When you think about what it takes to raise a cow and then schlep it around, they're in this like agrarian society, but they're also wandering around. You have to have a lot of grass for these cows to eat. You're going to kill your most valuable item and you're going to give it to God. That is a big investment. Not everybody has a cow. Now, we learn also about these little stands in ancient Jerusalem where you could go and buy the cow. You didn't have to raise it yourself. You could go, it's like a cow vending machine. You'd go, you'd buy the cow, you'd take it to the offering. A little bit different of the emotional investment, to your point, Steve. But if you think about in this era, they're just in the wilderness. You know, they're about to be, really. We're about to learn all about in the book of Muhlbaum. But they're getting ready to have this ritual life, and not everybody has livestock that they can afford to get rid of. So here, the nefesh, the soul, can offer a very humble offering of grain. They can bring it to the offering, and it counts as if they've sacrificed their soul. That is such an amazing level of sensitivity. We're going to see something really similar when we get to Tazria, when the postpartum mother is going to bring an offering, and there are different scales depending on how much she can afford. So it can be really big and expensive, or it can be really, really humble, and it all counts. It's like a sliding scale of sacrificial offerings. So here, this nefesh is giving their whole soul by contributing whatever they can. That's something that I feel we've lost the plot in modern Jewish living. But I'm hoping one day we can return to that. Let's pick up at chapter 2, verse 2, here on page 5, or in whatever chumash you're using. So you're going to present this mincha to Aaron's sons, the priests. The priest shall scoop out of it a handful of its choice flour and oil, as well as all of its frankincense. And this token portion he shall turn into smoke on the altar, as an offering by fire of pleasing odor to God. One of my favorite phrases, reach nichoach. The remainder of the grain offering shall be for Aaron and his sons, a most holy portion from God's offerings by fire. When you present an offering of grain baked in the oven, it shall be of choice flour, unleavened cakes with oil mixed in, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. If your offering is a grain offering on a griddle, it shall be of choice flour with oil mixed in, unleavened. Break it into bits and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your offering is a grain offering in a pan, it shall be made of choice flour in oil. I was just at a rabbinic conference this week in San Francisco with a bunch of 400 Reform rabbis. And the head of our conference, Rabbi Hera Person, gave her annual report, which she framed as a Devar Torah on the book of Leviticus. And she started by showing us pictures of her favorite pandemic bakes, which were her challahs and her babkas, because she had time during the pandemic to bake challah and babka. So she has these pictures of these beautiful, yeasty concoctions, which you know are so fluffy and delicious. And she, talking about this section, talked about, what is it that makes us rise? What are the things that make us froth and bubble, the way that yeast makes something rise? And how, if we think about a spiritual practice, one of the reasons that this is unleavened could be because leavening is really reactive. But the mixing of has anybody ever made matzah? It's only one person. A couple of you have made matzah. It only takes you only have 18 minutes to do it. It's very quick. It's a quick baking project. Also, it's very fun. You should try and make matzah this year. Try this. Let me know how it goes. When you do it, it's so fast. You're mixing the water in. You're getting it as flat as you can, and you're shoving it in the oven because it has 18 minutes from start to finish. So if you think about what makes things rise and the things that agitate society, those, or each of us in society, those are things that really make us kind of activated. And that's often good, but often really difficult. When there's no leavening in bread, there's no action. There's nothing agitated at all. It's just mixing, flattening, and baking. There's nothing there to get frothy. And so when you think about the matzah, or this unleavened offering, these cakes of matzot that we're putting into this mincha, there's nothing there that's going to separate it from other things. It's just what it is. It's not activated. It's just an offering. It's almost like this peaceful, simple thing. And its simplicity is why it's, I think, so effective. So babka is awesome, and challah is awesome. But matzah in this case, which is probably way better than the box square matzah that we have. This matzah, also awesome. Also, you think about You know those flatbreads you can get in the Middle East where it's like really delicious olive oil with za'atar on top? Is that a thing for anybody? I love that. That's like what we're talking about. That's delicious. Okay. Unlike the gross blood and guts, I'm into this. The mincha offering is my jam. Okay. So take a look at what Naphtali Hertz Wiesel says. With admirable wisdom, the Torah in this portion mentions only those meal offerings, which share the specifications regarding the oil, frankincense, the handful of flour and oil, and the remainder, 5 meal offerings, including that of the Omer. All the others are different. Thus, the meal offerings of the needy sinner and of the suspected wife do not contain any oil or frankincense. No handful is offered up on the altar for the mincha brought with the showbread and with the 2 loaves on Shavuot. And the cake meal offering and the inauguration meal offering were offered up on the leaving no remainders. So basically, over the course of the rest of the Torah, we've got a million other offerings that are going to look a lot like the mincha. Some of them are different. They don't have oil or they're entirely burned. He's just telling us to read these with nuance. Okay. Look here, Vayikra Rabbah 3:5, a similar theme to the one we read, but I think this is so powerful. A woman once brought a handful of flour, whereupon the Kohen scorned her, saying, "See what these offer us? It will neither do for a meal nor for the altar." This Kohen was addressed in a dream. Do not scorn her. It is as if she had offered up her very soul. You bring what you can, and it must be good enough. And how powerful, we get revelation in dreams. Only those who receive revelation. So here the priest got revelation. It was so important that there was a revelatory dream. Don't scorn her. She has offered up her very soul. This is so powerful. Yeah.
You said in modern Jewish life we've lost the plot.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yes. If you have, let's say, a child, and you want to send that child to day school, and you want to send that child to summer camp, you want to send that child to religious school, you want to be temple members, you have to be in a pretty strong financial position to do all of those things because of how expensive Jewish living is in America and around the world. We have not figured out an elegant or dignified way of easily allowing folks to tap into Jewish life at a level that is affordable. Every organization, including our own, says that there should be no financial barriers to participation, and we mean it. And those conversations can be really hard for folks who are asking for help or who need scholarships or who are looking for extra funding or can't afford to send their kid on a semester in Israel. You know, there's a lot of, there's a large, I think, financial disparity within our community that we don't always pay attention to with kindness or dignity. I have more on that for a different day, though. Yeah,
So
Candy.
how do our institutions address that? And I don't mean the Federation, I mean our temple. How does our temple address that?
So Temple, I can speak more about this after, but Temple is incredibly accommodating. When folks come to us and they say, like, you know, it's too much for us this year, we're like, great, let's figure it out with you. And we've got a whole procedure that our membership team uses to help walk folks through that. And we've got incredibly generous scholarships available for kid and teen programming and for our own programming here. So we've got different ways to do it, but it doesn't always feel very good to have to ask. And that's hard. I mean, my kid goes to day school because we got a scholarship. Like, it's not always easy to get those conversations.
So are there scholarships for Sunday school for
Mhm.
kids to attend?
Yep, for sure. Okay, let's go to our famous vegetarian, Rabbi Cook, the bottom of page 5. Since animals, this is going to be good. Since animals possess no mind, they attain their essential perfection only through being sacrificed to God, with the offering of their blood and fat, the repositories of their vitality. The intelligent human being, on the other hand, grasps the essence of the sacrificial ritual and draws closer to God by means of his mind. His mind. However, by the end of time, the knowledge of the Lord will extend to the animals also, as stated by Isaiah. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. Whereupon this offering, the vegetarian mincha, will be pleasant to the Lord, as in the days of old and in former years. Poor animals. Anybody who is close with animals knows there's more to it than that. Come on. Come on. Okay, let's talk about praying, shall we? we have this dynamic where the prayers of our day have taken the place of the sacrifices of the days of old. So here we have from the Mishnah Torah, thus 3 prayers are recited daily: the evening prayer, the morning prayer, and the mincha prayer. There are 4 on Sabbaths, festivals, and Rosh Chodesh, the 3 that are recited daily, and Musaf. On Yom Kippur there are 5, these 4, and the Ne'ilah prayer. The number of these prayers may not be diminished, but it may be increased. If a person wants to pray all day long, he may. Any prayer that one adds is considered as a free will offering. Therefore, one must add a new idea consistent with that blessing in each of the middle blessings. However, making an addition of a new concept, even in only one blessing, is sufficient in order to make known that this is a voluntary prayer and not obligatory. In the first 3 blessings and the last 3 blessings, one must never add, detract, or change anything at all. So in case you think that prayer is less rigid than the sacrifices, don't worry, it's not. So this idea, though, that we kind of had Jewish rhythm. By the time the temples were destroyed, we had Jewish rhythm. We had the day. We had the Shir Shel Yom, the Psalm of the day. We had these sacrifices. It was a machine. We were cranking out Jewish living. And when the temple's destroyed and they look around at each other, they go, what are we going to do now? What can we do? We can make our own offerings. We have offerings inside that we can bring to God. So as things transition, they kept the pace of the day. They kept the evening offering and the morning offering and the afternoon offering because that's what the Jewish day felt like. There was rhythm of the day, and that's a very short overview of how we get to prayer services. It's obviously more complicated than that. But this idea that you can always add, there's room all day long for the free will offerings of the heart and mind. There are the things that are required, but there's also lots of room for whatever is going on. Whatever things we're asking for, reflecting on. Anybody want to say anything about prayer? Vivian.
Is the number 100? We're supposed to do 100 blessings?
Okay, blessings and prayers are different. This is different. So, we are taught in a rabbinic text we should say 100 blessings a day, which I love this teaching. It's a way of framing the day as abundant. It's full of things that we want to say thank you for. Those don't count as prayer the way the Amidah counts as prayer. So when we're talking about this and we talk about the middle blessings, we can probably understand pretty surely that we're talking about Amidah, the prayer. So prayer and blessing are different.
But the Amidah is full of little blessings. Are they just generic? Is that the point?
It's that they're prescribed, perhaps. They each have a theme.
But it's not something you are experiencing in the moment.
Correct. That's the tension between, we talk about kava and kavanah. So something that is fixed, kavua, is that. Those are the set prayers. And then kavanah are the intentions. And what's interesting is each prayer book is like a little snapshot of different generations of this. So some of you might know there's a choral piece that we do, especially on the high holidays, but it's in the weekday liturgy of Elohai Nitzor L'Shoni Meira. Do you know this? Elohai Nitzor L'Shoni Meira. Has anyone heard this? Some of you, okay. So that prayer was a spontaneous prayer offered by a rabbi that somebody liked so much that it made its way into printed prayer books generations later. So that went from kavanah, from intention, from spontaneous, into kava, something that's prescribed and now in the prayer book. So it's a journey. It's not static. Prayer is dynamic, at least in our movement. Okay, skip chapter 3. Move on. Let's move on. Go to page 7. Spoiler alert, there was more fat and entrails, kidneys, and the word protuberance. So you got it? Let's keep going. There's the 5 Books of Miriam, which came out a very long time ago by Elle Frankel. It's a favorite for me. Are people familiar with this book? She basically goes through each Torah portion and then gives us teeny tiny, 4-line midrashim, these little interpretations, from the perspective of different folks in that Torah portion, or just characters from Torah that we know. So on this Torah portion, I brought a couple of pieces, which I thought were interesting. She says, Mother Rachel teaches only gentle animals, cows, oxen, sheep, and goats are worthy of sacrifice. That is, only those animals who do not prey on or kill human beings or other animals. Sheep and herd animals are the quietest of creatures, as are turtle doves and pigeons. May their gentle souls persuade Shekhinah to have compassion on us and accept our prayers. Okay, here's the thing. If you've ever been at a farm, they're not the quietest of animals. But there is something about this, like, we only eat vegetarian animals. We don't eat birds of prey. We don't eat predators. Kosher animals are vegetarian. Isn't that interesting? Did you know that? You're ready for Jewish Jeopardy, guys, stick with me. So if we only eat these or only sacrifice these gentle animals, that is a value statement of some kind. It's up to us to figure out what that value is, because it's a bit of a mystery, like many things in Jewish life. But the idea that only these sorts of gentle, vegetarian, grazing creatures are what we can offer does give us something to think about. Now, we're offering them in a very gory, violent way that is not gentle, but is supposed to be, according to our tradition, a merciful, quick way of sacrificing an animal. So the reason that they're done in the way that they're killed is because it's supposed to be a kind of humane way of slaughtering. Now, whether that is true, I'm not the expert, but do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, couldn't you argue that that's more for a practical reason? Like if we were keeping
You sure could.
crocodiles and
You
wolves
sure
in
could.
ponds, it would be
Yes, it is not practical to domesticate your local friendly lion to offer as a sacrifice. Well, and also, kosher animals can't be dead. They have to be slaughtered. So, like, you can't find roadkill and eat it. Unless it's for pikuach nefesh, because, of course, that's the way out of anything. But, like, in general, like, even if you saw a cow that had just been struck by an oxen, you can't eat the cow. You got to let it go. Lou, yeah.
When it refers to sacrifice, it says you should sacrifice the whole animal. Put it, indicating that, what you got, I guess,
Some of them.
what?
Some of them. So some of them are burnt entirely, some of them are not.
When they talk about a lamb, particularly, it says, you sacrifice the lamb.
Right.
You're supposed to do the head, and
Right.
everything. So assuming you're supposed to, after the food that's created is supposed to be eaten.
Right.
And, traditionally they say, there's parts of an animal that you don't eat, like.
National campaign, no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right. So
This is their whole thing.
add it because they want to, beef up the beef market or something like that.
It's a lot of waste, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you can only eat half of an animal, it's a lot of waste.
Right.
So there must be a reason.
Well, I mean.
We would hope.
Is there it's not in this, I don't think it's in the Torah parts that describes, various parts of animals.
I don't think so. No, I mean, kashrut has its own, like, multi-generational, expansive literature.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, there's differences because, the Ashkenaz and the Sephardi.
Right.
Have different interpretations of,
Imagine that, the Jews not agreeing on something.
Passover,
Yeah.
what we eat during
Right.
Passover. I have my own ideas that, but Sephardi are smart and Ashkenaz are stupid. And that's why
That doesn't feel like a generous offering. But do you mean for Passover? I might agree if you mean for Passover. Coming from a Sephardi family, I think we've got it right.
I think it's more, Ashkenaz have more bugaboos than Sephardi.
Oh, no. I think they just have different flavors, frankly. Yeah.
Maybe particularly in food.
Well, Judy?
Just in terms of sacrificing a whole animal,
Yeah.
prior to this moment, Noahide laws
Mhm.
were that, in the time of Noah, animals were like, they would just sort of not sacrifice whole animal, they would just take off parts of the animal, and the animals would suffer.
Yeah.
So, sort of, we don't do that.
No. Well, that's the thing. That's kind of the, like, it feels weird to use the word humane, but I think there is something about the kind of the thought process, at least around it, is to not make it any more agonizing than it already would have been, right? Also, can we just spend 1 second on the Reach Nichoach? What does it say about the theology of Leviticus that we need an odor pleasing to God, that we're feeding God these sacrifices?
I like that. I'm talking about the mincha, I always thought of it as part of the meat process, and when I mean the barbecue, but, the nice smell. But it doesn't say that God needs it.
Ah.
We think it's pleasing. I'm not clear, I don't know if the text says that God says.
I think it's Reach Nichoach Ladonai. So whether it's pleasing to God or that we're making it for God is kind of like one of these ambiguities in the preposition.
So you could read it as, we think it's pleasing to God.
Mm-hmm. What's better than the smell of freshly baking bread? It's pleasing. That's very good. But can God smell it? It must have been smoke. They're burning it. Yeah.
There's a tremendous difference between what is occurring with the building of the Mishkan,
Mm-hmm.
where God says, bring whatever your heart can bring to building this, and this very aggressive killing of animals. There just seems to be, it's almost bipolar.
There's one thing, though, that I think they have in common. Tell me if this is satisfying to you. Maybe it won't be. There are more verses dedicated to the building of the Mishkan than anything else in Torah. Rule after rule, measurement after measurement, specificity beyond our wildest dreams. I would argue that these passages are also densely concerned with kind of the blueprint of ritual life. So the gentleness of bring your fancy woven fabrics and your gold instruments that you pillaged from the Egyptians and all of the things your heart desires to contribute. I feel that we've kind of and I myself do this too, we've overemphasized truma, the voluntary gifts to the building, and not the hard labor it would have taken to actually build the thing. And then, by the way, to have to tear it down and rebuild it everywhere we go. I think we've overemphasized the kind of nice heartfelt thing and not the real, there were so many rules about it. I think with our sacrifices, it is not gentle, but it is also, we know there are free will offerings. There are things that we're going to give that are of our kind of heart that we're adding to the array. So yeah, I think it's a good point. They are different. Is that satisfying? A little bit? Great, I'll take that. I'll take a little bit. Okay. All right. She also gives us Dona. We're going to skip it for now. I'm so sorry. But for the sake of time, let's go to chapter 4. Because I want to talk about atonement briefly. Okay. We're going to do purgation offerings, a word that only ever seems to come up when we're talking about the Torah. This is the chatat. I'm on page 8 or chapter 4, verse 1. God spoke to Moses. By the way, you'll see here, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. We know who's talking this time. Speak to the Israelite people thus. When a person unwittingly incurs guilt in regard to any of God's commandments about things not to be done, and does one of them, if it is the anointed priest who has incurred guilt, so that blame falls upon the people. He shall offer for the sin of which he is guilty a bull of the herd without blemish as a purgation offering to God. Okay. Look at the Hebrew, verse 2. Daber el b'nei Yisrael lemor nefesh. When a person, a nefesh, we have the same soul, okay? So anybody with a soul, in theory, could do this thing, which is to sin, to violate one of the negative commandments. Nachmanides says, the Hebrew literally says, when any soul unwittingly incurs guilt. For the soul is the seat of thought. Even an unwitting act demands a sacrifice because the transgressions give rise to disgrace in the soul, and they are a defect in it. But it cannot face its creator unless it is purified from all sin. If it were not so, every fool on earth would deserve to come before God. So even the unwitting soul must bring a sacrifice in order to earn closeness to God who bestowed it. That is why the word soul is used here. But our sages interpret it to mean that strangers and slaves are also included in this rule. So the kind of thrust of the sages in general is to see the word nefesh as a hyper-inclusive word. So it's not just you proto-Jews who are going to make these offerings. It's actually the people who are around you and the people who serve you. They are also eligible. If they mess up because they're bound by the laws, they too can offer these sacrifices. What's interesting is if you do something unwittingly, someone has to tell you. Right? Somebody has to be kind of helping you understand that because otherwise, like if God says, don't do this, and you do it, maybe you know, like for instance, if you eat a BLT, but you thought it was Beyond Bacon or whatever, but you ate it, maybe you liked it, you maybe didn't realize it at the time. You might have noticed it after, or somebody might come over and be like, hey, whoa, that was real bacon, okay? So you maybe need somebody to help tell you. So this is another kind of hint. It's not explicit here, but it's a hint that they're kind of like co-responsible. The stakes, by the way, are very high. It's life and death for these people. Their theology is very, very high stakes. It's all conditional. If they mess up the covenant, they will be cursed for generations. That's what they've just been told. They know the stakes are very high. So there's a sense of like co-accountability within the community, not just for the priests, but actually among the Joe Schmoes of the Israelites, that like they're going to have to just be watchful and mindful. And so when you think about like what it means to atone, we don't always know how we've messed up with other people. They have to tell us. And then we have to atone when they tell us. They can't just tell us and we keep moving, right? In theory, we should try. Okay. Anybody want to say anything about Nefesh? Lou?
I would say people are more self-reflective. That I think if you're making mistakes, I think it's more, I think you wake up the next morning and say, oh, did I blow that?
I think some people.
Rather than, someone standing next to me and say, oh, yesterday you did this and that and the other thing, and, I think more people self-realize that they've messed up.
Some people may, but I think also like you think about the diversity of human interactions that we have with each other, and sometimes we think that we've had a totally normal interaction with somebody and we have devastated them in what we've said or how we've acted, and we may not get the cue in real time that we've messed up. And those are the things that, 10 years later, you're up at 2 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? You don't always notice in real time. Yes, Steve?
Fox renders hatat.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Fox renders hatat as decontamination offering.
Aha. Now, why would we need a decontamination offering? What have we done?
Our soul has been contaminated.
Our soul has been contaminated, or our misdeeds have rendered the ritual life impure. Right? If somebody is like, oh, this is the meat pan and this is the dairy pan. They didn't have this in the Mishkan, but let's, for the sake of imagination, oops, I made my mac and cheese in the meat pan. The whole thing it needs to be decontaminated. You got to reset. You got to re-kosher everything, right? So here, this maybe is a way to reset the ritual life or to reset whatever like kind of moral impurity is happening. Decontamination is a strong word though, isn't it? It always makes me think of Monsters, Inc. Did you guys ever see Monsters, Inc.? That movie from Pixar? It came out when I was a kid. So the monsters go into a kid's room, they're supposed to make them scream because they work on scream energy. They don't have electricity, they use scream power. So the monsters go into the middle of the night into these kids' rooms and they get the kids to scream. But if they come back with one of them comes back with a sock on his back, it got stuck to his fuzz and he has to be decontaminated and they shave him. And it's like humiliating, but he has to be decontaminated. Anyway. This is my stage of life, you guys. I have little kids. Good.
So, you mentioned Hatat. I'm not sure if this is right, but I remember someone saying that the word hate derives from an archery concept of missing the mark. And so the idea is not sin so much as committing evil as just not hitting the right spot.
That's very good.
And in relationships, that's often the case.
Absolutely.
You haven't said, you think you're coming close, but you miss the mark.
Yep. So there was a book that came out a couple of years ago through the CCAR Press called Prophetic Voices, Renewing and Reimagining Haftarah. The Reform movement has long been a movement characterized by its relationship with the prophets, and we just don't always do a deep dive into our prophetic texts that go with our Torah portions as a Haftarah. Every now and then we'll do a season of study on them, but it's, I think, interesting to look at. My friend, Cantor Sarah Gerbiner, wrote a piece in this book that's I included here as a framing, and then you have the text of the Haftarah after. So look at page 9. The book of Leviticus begins with a list of commanded sacrifices, which we've just dug into a little, the well-being, meal, guilt, sin, and restitution offerings. Our first parasha of the sacrificial rites clarifies their common purpose, to evoke atonement for our sins. The verb lechaper, from like Yom Kippur, to make expiation, appears 11 times in the text of this parasha. As such, the Haftarah focuses on a time when the children of Israel failed to make restitution, and Isaiah's response of prophetic outrage. Isaiah's reproach emphasizes the benefits of the covenant between God, that's lowercase, and God's people, and the risks of not fulfilling our ancient sacrificial obligations. However, in the middle of the text of the Haftarah reading, the tone shifts. Indeed, as humans, we err, but forgiveness is always possible. God speaks uncommonly in the first person singular, Anochi, Anochi, I am the one who blots out your transgressions. And later, I have swept away your transgressions like a cloud, your sins like a thick cloud. Return to me. These verses are central to our Yom Kippur liturgy, recited at least 4 times throughout the day. It can be difficult to connect with the God of Leviticus, the God of blood and gut sacrifices. Yet we embrace the first-person singular relationship asserted in this Haftarah, which reminds us of the possibility of teshuvah, of return and redemption. In this way, we find assurance, not only on Yom Kippur, but also throughout the year. God always awaits our resolve to change. So there's a few embolded verses here. You can look at verse 25, which she references, Anochi, Anochi, I am the one. It is for my sake. Wipe away your transgressions and remember your sins no more. Down at verse 6 of the next chapter, thus says God, the sovereign of Israel, their redeemer, God of hosts. I am the first and I am the last. There is no God but me. This is a famous verse that comes from this Torah, the Haftarah. And then flip to page 11, verse 22. I wipe away your sins like a cloud, your transgressions like mist. Come back to me, for I redeem you. Shuva Elai, return to me. So in this book, in this Haftarah book, there's an alternative reading for each one, and it happens that this one comes from Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver. So I brought it for you. Judaism admonished men not to despair of the future, nor of their own strength, nor of mankind's inexhaustible spiritual resources, nor of God's cooperation. Long and hard is the way, but there is a way and there is a goal. The moral life and human aspirations are the sacraments of Judaism. It recognizes no others. There are no beliefs which save men. There are no ceremonial or ritual acts, the very performance of which bestows supernatural grace and saving power. There are visible symbols in Judaism, signs of the covenant, memorials of fidelity, but no sacraments. From earnest and faithful quest of the good life in all ways, great or small, flow all divine grace and power. Very cool. Very cool. But I'm going to have Mary Oliver get the last word. No offense to Rabbi Silver. I love this piece. And I love the kind of journey throughout the book of Leviticus that we go on around basically like what does it mean to be in relationship with God? Because ultimately that's what it's about. So her piece here is called Where Does the Temple Begin? Does it end? There are things you can't reach, but you can reach out to them all day long. The wind, the bird flying away, the idea of God. And it can keep you as busy as anything else and happier. The snake slides away, the fish jumps like a little lily out of the water and back in. The goldfinches sing from the unreachable top of the tree. I look, morning to night, I am never done with looking. Looking, I mean not just standing around, but standing around as though with your arms open and thinking maybe something will come, some shining coil of wind or a few leaves from any old tree. They are all in this too. And now I will tell you the truth. Everything in the world comes, at least closer and cordially. Like the nibbling, tinsel-eyed fish, the unlooping snake, like goldfinches, little dolls of gold fluttering around the corner of the sky of God, the blue air. Shabbat Shalom. Well, I gotta get to the chapel. I hope others will join as well. This really is the modern era. Well, I can see you're moving. You're on 2 feet. Thank God. You look balanced.
I have a certain amount of energy. I spend a little bit every day.
Yep, I think you do. Healing is hard work.
This was wonderful.
All right. Well, I hope some of you will join the chapel this morning. Maybe for a second. For,
Last night when my TV went out, there was a about
I was on condominium now.
And cover them over.
I took care of the way to the sink.
I wait 4 days.
Except for water and sewer. Until my son
See, if there's
any growth, my own. Right.
and then, oh, that's interesting.
Gas account.
And then,
It
depends
So I'm going to the service.
what I find that follow this way,
How. But we'll see.
widespread is it?
Yes.
I
Pay a lot.
was gonna ask.
Pay a lot.
More aggressive in the house. And if that scares something,
Then you are.
then I'm in deep trouble. And it's gonna be very expensive. Well, it just seems like a lot, especially with, kids rings. Well, they need to, but,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I don't know.
the whole idea of testing is to make sure that we're gonna be okay.
Exactly.
And my daughter,
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
and,
All right.
Yeah, going to serve all those
Excuse
places. Managers and the managers.
I hope you have only good things to tell me.
And
I only have Linda's telephone number, so I can't John?
Yeah.
I only have Linda's telephone number, so I can't
So, are you going, are you going to?
You can't what?
check with you to see how it's going. Your
Check.
haircut?
Oh.
Well, maybe if I call
No.
Linda's number, it's the home.
I was going up to the service.
No, you can catch her out in California.
Okay.
You can have my number if you want.
I have to get the service number. They're starting.
Ah,
It takes so
Okay.
much effort to stay with her and hear everything she's saying. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and it goes down at the end and, and you're not familiar with what she's saying. Takes a